He protected 3 lost alien princesses. Then their cosmic queen mother found him. Part 1. The Crash in the Nevada Desert. Cal Reeves was not the kind of man who asked questions he did not need answers to. He was 38 years old, lived alone on a small ranch outside a forgotten town in Nevada, and liked it that way. His mornings started before the sun came up. His evenings ended early. He fixed what broke, fed what needed feeding, and left the rest of the world alone. He had served 12 years in the U.S. Army as a ranger. He had been places most people never heard of, and done things that were never written down anywhere. When he came back home, he did not talk about any of it. He bought 40 acres of dry land, a few horses, and a truck that was old before he bought it. That was enough. Most nights, after dinner, he sat on the porch and looked at the stars. Not because he was searching for anything, just because the sky was wide and quiet was something he had learned to value a great deal. On a cool Tuesday evening in October, a streak of violet light tore across the sky from east to west and disappeared behind the ridge 3 miles from his property. The sound came a few seconds later, a deep low boom that rolled through the desert floor and shook the windows in his kitchen. Cal set down his coffee. He sat there for a moment, listening. No secondary explosion, no fire visible above the ridge. He thought about calling the county sheriff, then decided against it. The sheriff was useless on a good day. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed his flashlight and the old hunting rifle he kept by the door, and drove out in his truck. The road turned to dirt after the first mile, then to no road at all after the second. He parked where the terrain got too rough for the truck and walked the rest of the way with his flashlight cutting through the dark. He smelled the crash site before he saw it. Something sharp and metallic, mixed with a burnt chemical smell that had no natural source he recognized. Then he came over a low rise and stopped walking. The ship was not large, about the size of a city bus, maybe a little longer. It had come down at an angle and carved a long scar in the desert floor. The outer shell was dark and smooth, not made of any material he could name. Parts of it were still glowing faintly along the edges, a dull violet color that was already fading. There was no fire, no fuel spill. Whatever powered the thing, it was not anything close to what he knew. He stood there for a full minute, just looking at it. Then he heard a sound from the far side of the wreckage, something between a cough and a cry. He moved around the hull carefully, rifle up, watching where he put his feet. He found 3 figures in the shadow of the broken ship. They were not human. They were tall and slender, with skin that held a faint silver tone even in the dim light of his flashlight. Their features were angular and fine, with large dark eyes that caught the light and reflected it in a way no human eye could. Their clothing was strange, layered and close-fitting, made of something that looked almost like fabric, but moved like liquid when they shifted. 2 of them were sitting up, leaning against the hull. The third was flat on her back in the berth. Cal stood where he was, and did not move for a long moment. They were scared. He could see that clearly. The 2 who were upright were holding the third one, and looking at him with wide, dark eyes that were tracking his every move, the way a cornered animal tracks a threat. They were not aggressive. They were frightened and hurt, and very far from wherever they were supposed to be. He lowered the rifle. One of them, the tallest, the one who seemed the oldest, had a small device clipped to the collar of her suit. It was cracked along one side and flickering weakly. She reached up and touched it, and then she spoke. The sound that came out of her mouth was nothing close to English. It was layered and tonal, like music pressed into language. But the device on her collar crackled and produced a broken version of her words in a flat, mechanical voice. "We," the device said, then static, then hunted. Then she passed out. Cal looked at the 3 unconscious alien girls lying in the Nevada dirt. He looked at the crashed ship behind them. He looked up at the sky, which was dark and full of stars, and completely silent. He thought about what the sensible thing to do was. Call the government, call the military, drive away and pretend he had not seen any of this. Let someone else deal with it. He thought about all of those options for about 15 seconds. Then he bent down and started checking them for injuries. All three were alive. The youngest one, small even by their standards, with a rounder face and restless hands even in unconsciousness, had a cut along her hairline that was bleeding something darker than red. The middle one had what felt like a broken arm when Cal ran his hands carefully along her limbs. The eldest, the one who had spoken, had bruising along her ribs and a burn mark on her left shoulder. None of it looked immediately life-threatening, but none of it was good either. He carried them to his truck one at a time. It took 3 trips over rough ground in the dark, and left his lower back unhappy about the whole situation. He laid them across the back seat and the truck bed as carefully as he could, covered them with the old blankets he kept behind the seat, and drove back to the ranch at a speed that was slow enough not to jostle them, and fast enough that he did not have too much time to think about what he was doing. He put them in the barn. It was warm and dry and hidden from the road, and it was the most defensible structure on his property, apart from the house itself. He cleared out a space in the clean hay, laid out a spare mattress and 2 sleeping bags, and set up a battery lantern at a low setting, so they would not wake up in total darkness. Then he sat on a hay bale in the corner and watched them breathe. The eldest one, the one with the translation device, stirred around midnight. Her dark eyes opened slowly and found him across the barn. She went rigid immediately, which he expected. He did not move. He kept his hands visible, and his posture as unthreatening as a large, weathered man sitting in a barn could manage. "You are safe," he said. "Nobody else knows you are here." The device on her collar, even cracked, caught enough of his words to push something back in her language. She stared at him. Then very slowly, the rigid tension in her body dropped by a fraction. Cal reached over and poured a small amount of water into a clean cup and set it near her hand. Then he leaned back against the wall and said nothing else. Outside, the Nevada night was cold and wide and completely still. The stars were out in full. The same stars he had looked at his whole life, which now felt like a very different sky. He did not sleep that night. He did not call anyone. He sat in the barn and waited for morning, and whatever was going to come with it. He protected 3 lost alien princesses. Then, their cosmic queen mother found him. Part 2. Shelter, Suspicion, and the First Contact. The first problem was air. Cal figured it out on the second morning when the youngest one, the one with the cut on her head, started breathing in shallow, rapid pulls, and her skin went from silver gray to something closer to pale ash. He did not know what was wrong exactly, but he recognized respiratory distress well enough. He had seen it in the field more times than he wanted to remember. He went to his workshop and started pulling things apart. He had an old oxygen concentrator he had used during a bad winter 2 years back, when a chest infection had put him on the floor for a week. He had spare tubing, a mixing valve left over from a welding setup, and a fair amount of stubbornness. He rigged a rough atmospheric blend, more nitrogen, less oxygen, lower than sea level concentration, based on nothing more than the observation that the youngest one calmed down when he cracked the barn door to let in the dry desert air, rather than the warmer, denser air inside. It worked well enough. Not perfectly, but well enough. The eldest one watched all of this with her large dark eyes and said nothing while he worked. Her translation device was still cracked. That was the second problem. Cal was not an electronics expert, but he had spent years in the field repairing equipment that had no business being repaired with the tools available. He brought his soldering iron and a magnifying light into the barn, and spent most of the second afternoon bent over the device, while the eldest one held still and tried not to look nervous. The repair was rough. The casing was a material he could not identify, and the internal components were smaller than anything he had worked with before. But the core circuit was not entirely unlike things he had seen. He bridged 2 broken connections with copper wire thinner than a hair, reset what appeared to be a power cell by grounding it briefly against his truck battery, and handed it back. The device answered in English. It was still flat and mechanical, and it missed words, but it was functional. Her name, as best the device could render it, came out as a string of tones that Cal's ears could not hold on to. He told her that and asked if there was a shorter version. She thought for a moment and said a single syllable. It sounded close enough to Lyra that he used that. The middle one, when she woke fully the next morning, gave him something that became Ren. The youngest, who had been awake and watching him since the previous night, with enormous suspicious eyes, said something sharp and two-toned that landed as Sova. Over the next 2 days, Lyra talked and Cal listened. They were daughters of the Vorath Eternal Throne. Their mother ruled an empire that covered 47 star systems. They had been traveling on a supervised diplomatic route, their first long journey without a full royal escort, meant to be educational, when something hit their ship. Not an accident, a deliberate interception. Someone had known their route and had planned the attack carefully. The ship's emergency beacon had been destroyed in the crash. Without it, they had no way to contact home directly. Cal sat on his hay bale and turned all of this over in his mind, the way he turned over a problem in the field. Slowly, without hurry, looking at it from each side before deciding what it meant. He asked 2 questions. The first, were they a danger to the people around him? The nearest town was 14 miles away. He had no close neighbors, but there were people within range if something large and violent happened on his property. Lyra said no. They were not armed. They had no equipment left that could cause harm. They were 3 injured young women who wanted to go home. The second, would the people who attacked their ship come to Earth? Lyra was quiet for long enough that he already knew the answer before she gave it. Probably already looking. Cal went inside, made coffee, and stood at his kitchen window looking out at the desert for a while. Then he went back to the barn and started thinking about the property's perimeter. 400 miles away, in a signals monitoring station outside Colorado Springs, a government analyst named Nina Draper was sitting at her desk at 11 at night, going through data she was not technically supposed to still be working on. Nina was 31, careful, and had a habit of pulling threads that other people let go. Her supervisor had told her to log the Nevada impact event as a probable meteorite, file it under atmospheric anomalies, and move on. It was not the first time she had been told to move on from something that did not sit right with her. Usually she did. This time, something about the electromagnetic signature of the impact kept pulling at the back of her mind. She pulled the satellite thermal data for the Nevada site. The heat signature of the crash was wrong for a meteorite. The descent path was wrong. The material scatter on the ground was wrong. And there was a brief, partial radio pulse in a frequency range that had no business appearing naturally, that had been recorded by 3 different monitoring arrays in the 90 seconds before impact. She did not tell her supervisor. She started building a file on her personal laptop instead. Back at the ranch, the 3rd night brought the first close call. Sova, who had recovered the fastest and was already bored and restless in the way that very young people who are used to moving freely become restless when they are told to stay still, slipped out of the barn before dawn. Not to run, just to breathe the open air and stand under the sky. Cal had not given her a rule about it yet, because he had not thought he needed to. He was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee, when he saw movement near the fence line through the window. He was outside in 12 seconds. He reached her at the edge of the dirt road, just as headlights swept around the distant bend. A black SUV, moving slowly, no plates visible at that distance. It rolled down the road, too slow for someone just passing through, and then turned off at the far junction and disappeared. Cal had his hand on Sova's arm the whole time, both of them still in the shadow of the fence post. He waited 3 full minutes after the lights were gone before he moved. Then he looked at her. She was taller than him by a few inches and radiated the kind of offended dignity that came from someone who was not used to being grabbed by the arm and held in place. Her dark eyes were bright with irritation. Cal said, "You stay inside until I say otherwise." He said it quietly. No anger in it, just a flat, clear fact. Sova stared at him. She had the look of someone waiting for him to soften it, apologize for it, or take it back. He did none of those things. He just waited. She went inside. Cal stood at the fence for a while longer, watching the road. His jaw was tight. The SUV was not county. It was not a rancher coming home late. It had moved with the particular slow patience of something looking for a specific location and not quite finding it yet. They were already in the area, closer than Lyra had expected. He walked back to the barn and woke Lyra up. "How long do we have?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment, calculating. Then she said, "Days, not weeks." Cal nodded. He picked up his flashlight and went to check the south fence. There was no point in trying to sleep now. There was work to do, and in his experience, the night before things got difficult was the best time to get ahead of them. The stars above the ranch were cold and very far away, and somewhere among them, something was already moving in the direction of Earth. He checked the fences and walked the land and made his plans in the dark, the way he always had. He protected 3 lost alien princesses. Then their cosmic queen mother found him. H2, Part 5, The Queen Arrives. The morning of the second day after the battle was quiet. Too quiet, in the way that Cal had learned over many years, meant something was about to change. The desert around the ranch sat completely still. No wind, no birds. The horses in the far pasture had stopped moving, and were all facing the same direction, toward the open flats to the west. Their ears up, and their bodies tight with the tension that animals feel before humans do. Cal was on the porch with his coffee and his wrapped arm when he saw it. The sky to the west changed color. It did not change the way a sky changes at sunset, slowly and in stages, bleeding through orange and red. It changed the way a room changes when someone very large walks through the door, suddenly and completely. One moment the sky above the flat desert was the pale blue of early morning. The next moment it was something else. A deep violet gold that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, not sitting on top of the sky, but inside it, as if the light itself had a different quality, a different weight. Cal set his coffee down. Nina came through the screen door behind him and stopped when she saw it. She did not say anything, neither did he. They stood on the porch and watched. The ship came down in the western flats, 2 miles from the ranch house. It was not enormous by the standards of what Lyra had described to them, not a warship, not a carrier, but by the standards of anything that had ever landed on Earth, it was staggering. It was roughly rectangular, dark along its lower half and light along its upper, and it moved with a silence that was deeply wrong for an object of its size. It came down slowly and settled onto the desert floor with a contact so smooth that the dust barely lifted around it. When it was still, it sat on the flats like a small city that had always been there, and the violet gold light faded from the sky, and the morning went back to its normal color. Lyra was standing in the barn doorway behind them. Cal had not heard her come out. She was looking at the ship with her arms at her sides, and her face doing something complicated. Relief and fear, and something else that did not have a simple name. The particular expression of someone who has been lost for a long time, and can finally see home, but is not entirely sure yet what home will look like when they get there. "She came herself," Lyra said. "I was not certain she would." "You were not certain your own mother would come?" Nina said. Lyra was quiet for a moment. "My mother is the ruler of 47 star systems," she said. "There are many things that require her presence. We are 3 of them, but not always the most urgent 3. Cal watched the ship. A door had opened in its lower half, wide and bright. Figures were emerging, 12 of them in a close formation, tall and precise in movement, wearing something that was clearly armor, even at this distance. And then, behind them, one more figure. She was taller than the guards. She walked differently, not faster, not slower, but with a quality that Cal had seen once or twice in his life, in commanders who had been commanding things for so long that authority had become as natural to them as breathing. She did not look around at the desert with curiosity or caution. She looked at the ranch house with the focused attention of someone who already knew exactly where they were going. Cal went down the porch steps. His left arm was wrapped in a clean dressing that Nina had replaced that morning. His boots were dusty. He had not slept more than 5 hours in the last 3 days. He walked to the fence line at the front of the property and stopped there and waited. The Queen of the Vorath Eternal Throne crossed 2 miles of Nevada desert and stopped on the other side of the fence. She was close now, and the full effect of her presence was something physical. Not threatening, not aggressive, but enormous in the way that standing near a very old and very large natural thing is enormous. Her eyes were darker than her daughter's, and held a quality that Cal could only describe later to Nina as depth, like looking at something that had been watching the universe for a very long time and had very few surprises left. She looked at him for a while without speaking. Her guards were deployed in a half-circle behind her, but she herself stood at the fence the way he stood at it. Open, no posturing, just 2 people looking at each other across a low wooden rail. When she spoke, the words came through his belt device clean and clear. Better translation than he had ever gotten from Lyra's repaired unit. Her voice underneath was layered in a way that pressed against the chest. She asked him why he had done it. Cal thought about it honestly. He did not rush the answer. She did not look like someone who appreciated rushed answers. They were hurt, he said. They were scared. Someone was coming to kill them. He paused. That was enough reason. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. She looked past him at the ranch house, at the barn, at the marks on the ground where the battles had been fought. She looked at his arm. Then she sent something that the device translated slowly, as if it was choosing the words carefully. In 47 star systems, across 10,000 years of Vorath record, no being outside our blood has ever stood without being asked, without reward, and without alliance between the throne and those who would break it. Cal looked at her. I would appreciate it if you kept that quiet, he said. My reputation in this county is already difficult. The Queen looked at him. It was subtle, and it passed quickly. And it was nothing as simple as a smile. Vorath queens, Lyra would tell Nina later, did not smile in the way humans did. But it was something, a shift, a recognition of something unexpected that she had, despite 10,000 years of records, not seen before. She looked past him again at the ranch. The faction that ordered the attack on my daughter's vessel has been identified, she said. My forces are moving on them now. The political matter will be resolved within days. Your world will not be involved. Good, Cal said. I would like to offer you something, she said, for what you have done. Cal waited. She offered him a title in the Vorath court, formal recognition, recorded in the Royal Archive, which was apparently a thing that beings across 47 star systems considered significant. She offered resources, material, technological, knowledge, at a scale that she named specifically, and that made Nina, standing behind him on the porch and listening through a second translation device she had rigged, go very still. She offered a formal alliance between her house and his household, which she said would mean something concrete and lasting. Cal listened to all of it. He listened to it the same way he had listened to the diplomat the day before, fully, without interrupting, giving it the respect of genuine consideration. Then he said, "Thank you, but no." The Queen's expression did not change, but the quality of her stillness shifted. She was not offended. She was, Cal thought, genuinely surprised, which was probably a rarer thing than the title she had offered. Is there nothing? She asked. Cal glanced down at the fence rail, then back up at her. Your ship took out a section of fence on the south side when it came down, he said. The posts are pressure-treated wood. Not hard to replace. The Queen of the Vorath Eternal Throne looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and said something to the nearest member of her guard. The guard moved immediately toward the south fence line with 3 others. The goodbyes happened at the ramp of the ship, where the violet gold light still clung in faint lines around the hull's edges. The Queen had returned aboard after a brief and formal conversation with her daughters, each one of which was careful and private, and none of which Cal watched. He stood with Nina near the front of the truck and waited. Sova came first. She walked up to Cal with the same energy she had brought to everything since she recovered. Restless, direct, not quite fitting into any single mood at once. She looked at him for a second, and then grabbed him in a hug that was sudden and complete and lasted long enough to be awkward. Cal stood with his arms out for a moment, then patted her on the shoulder once in the careful way of someone who is not accustomed to being hugged. When she let go, her eyes were bright. She said something in Vorath that the device did not catch fully. Then she went up the ramp. Ren came last. She stood in front of Cal and looked at him for a while, in the way she had always looked at things, quietly, completely, storing it. Then she raised 2 fingers and placed them gently against his chest, over his heart. She held them there for a moment. Then she spoke. He looked down at the translation device. She says, Lyra translated from beside him, her own voice careful, that you are the first person who ever made her feel that being safe and being free were the same thing. Cal did not say anything. He nodded once. Ren lowered her hand and walked up the ramp without looking back. Lyra was the last. She stood in front of him and Nina, and she looked at both of them, and she said, the device is yours, so you can hear us if we call. We will call. She went up the ramp. It closed behind her. The ship rose. It rose with the same silence it had come down with, steady and enormous and impossible. And the violet gold light came back for a minute around its hull as it climbed, and then it was gone, up into the pale morning blue, smaller and then nothing at all. The desert was empty. The western flats were flat again, just dry ground and low brush, and the faint impressions in the dirt where something the size of a city block had rested for a few hours. Cal looked at the south fence line. The new posts were already in the ground, straight and clean, set better than the originals had been. He stood there for a while. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Nina was still standing by the truck, laptop bag on her shoulder, looking at the sky where the ship had been. When Cal passed her, she fell into step beside him without asking. They went up the porch steps and through the screen door into the kitchen. Nina sat at the table. Cal put the kettle on. The kitchen was quiet. The horses in the pasture were moving again, the tension gone from them. Outside, the Nevada wind had started up, dry and low, pushing dust along the fence line. Nina opened her laptop, then closed it, then looked at Cal. So, she said. Cal got 2 cups down from the cabinet. Yeah, he said. They sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the morning, with the Nevada wind outside and the translation device sitting between the sugar bowl and the salt shaker, its edge glowing faintly, and did not say anything else for a while. There was nothing else that needed saying. The sky was the usual sky again, pale blue and wide and going on forever. The same sky Cal had looked at his whole life from this same porch, which now was and always would be a completely different sky. He drank his coffee. He protected 3 lost alien princesses. Then their cosmic queen mother found him. Part 3. Hunters at the Door. Cal spent the days before the attack the way he had spent the days before every difficult operation in his military life, quietly and without wasted motion. He walked the full perimeter of his property 3 times, at different hours, memorizing the light and shadow at each point. He noted where the terrain worked in his favor, the dry creek bed to the east that would funnel anyone approaching from that direction into a narrow path, the cluster of large rocks to the north that broke line of sight, the open flats to the west that gave no cover at all to anyone crossing them. He noted where the terrain worked against him, the south approach from the road, which was flat and open and gave a clear view of the barn and the house from 200 meters out. He set perimeter sensors around the outer fence line. They were simple things: fishing line, small bells, trip-activated lights aimed away from the house so they would illuminate an intruder rather than blind him. He moved his horses to the far pasture and secured them there. He pulled a locked box from under his bed and checked the contents: the hunting rifle, a handgun he had not fired in 2 years, and enough ammunition for both that he hoped he would not need. He also started sleeping in 2-hour blocks instead of full nights. Lyra watched all of this from the barn door and said nothing until the 4th day. Then she told him something he had already half suspected. The hunters were not human. They were called the Scavren, a class of mercenary tracker used by powerful Thorak political factions. They wore biomimicry suits that would make them look human at a distance or in passing. Up close, the suits had limits. Cal asked what their weapons were like. Lyra described them. He listened carefully. Directed energy, focused heat essentially. Effective range roughly equal to a high-powered rifle. Slow to reset between shots. Not good in tight spaces. He thanked her and went back to work. They came on the 9th night. Cal was already awake when the first sensor on the east fence line tripped at 2 in the morning. He was dressed, boots on, and out the back door before the second one triggered 40 seconds later. There were 5 of them. He could not see them yet, but the pattern of the sensors told him their spacing and direction. They were moving in a line from the east, which meant they had come up through the dry creek bed exactly as he had predicted. Disciplined movement, coordinated. They had done this before. What they had not done before was approach a property prepared by someone who had spent 12 years doing exactly what they were doing, in worse terrain, against better-equipped opposition. Cal did not go to meet them. He let them come. The first one hit the fishing line trip across the mouth of the creek bed, where it opened onto his east pasture. It was attached to a series of tin cans filled with gravel in the brush 20 feet away. A simple, stupid-sounding thing that made an immediate and startling racket in the total quiet of the desert night. The line formation broke. 2 of them stopped. 2 went wide to flank. 1 pushed forward. The one who pushed forward walked directly into the shallow pit Cal had dug and covered with a board and a thin layer of dirt in the middle of the path. It was only 18 inches deep, but in the dark, a sudden drop of any size sends a person, or a person-shaped being, to the ground hard. The biomimicry suit was not designed to protect against rough impacts. Cal heard the sound of it hitting the ground from 50 meters away. He was already moving to the north by then, cutting wide around the 2 who had gone wide, using the rock cluster to stay invisible. He had gone dark. No flashlight. Nothing reflective. And he moved through terrain he knew by foot feel, in a way that his visitors, arriving for the first time in the dark, could not match. The 2 flankers met each other in the dark, on the far side of the rocks, and nearly fired on each other. Cal heard them communicate in short clip sounds that the translation device, which he now carried on his own belt, rendered as fragments. Confusion. They had expected a sleeping ranch. They had not expected a sleeping ranch to push back. He worked the outer 2 first, not with violence, but with noise and misdirection. A rock thrown hard against the far side of the water tank brought both of them spinning toward the sound. He was behind them before they finished turning, and he removed the scanning equipment from the belt of the nearest one, with a speed and precision that the being had no time to react to, before Cal was already gone again, back into the dark. The scanner was gone. Without it, they were tracking by sight and sound, in unfamiliar terrain. He let the 3 remaining ones converge toward the barn, which was empty of the princesses, who were in the house now, in the interior room with the heaviest walls. When all 3 were near the barn's east wall, he triggered the flares he had set on the ridge to the north. 3 bright red military flares, the kind that look exactly like a military perimeter signal to anyone who has spent time worrying about military perimeters. He also started a pre-recorded burst of radio traffic on a military frequency, something he still had the equipment for from a long time ago, and turned on every vehicle light on every piece of equipment he owned, up on the ridgeline, where they looked like a convoy positioning. The Scavran broke. Not in panic. They were professional enough to withdraw in order, but they withdrew. 2 of the 5 were compromised enough that they moved with difficulty. All of them had lost their scanning equipment. Their formation was gone. Their element of surprise was gone. They pulled back east through the creek bed the way they had come and did not return that night. Cal walked back to the house. He set the scanning device on the kitchen table and looked at it under the lamp. It was a flat, oval thing, dark and smooth, with a faint glow along one edge. He turned it over in his hands. Well made, elegant even. He set it down. Then he went to the barn, habit, before remembering he had moved the princesses inside. He went to the interior room and knocked once before opening the door. All 3 were awake. Sova was pacing in the small space. Ren was sitting in the corner, with her knees drawn up and her eyes on the floor. Lyra was standing, and her hands were shaking slightly at her sides. She looked at Cal for a long moment. He was dusty. His boots were muddy from the creekbed soil. He was carrying a piece of Scavran technology he had taken off one of them in the dark. He was unhurt. They left, he said. Lyra's shaking hands did not still immediately. She looked down at them as if surprised they were doing that, and then back up at him. Your hands were not shaking, she said through the translation device. It was not exactly a question. No reason for them to, he said. He set the scanning device on the small table in the corner and looked at the 3 of them. They will come back with more. We need a way to call your people before that happens. He looked at Lyra. Is any part of your ship's communication equipment salvageable? Lyra thought for a moment, then she said there might be a signal core intact in the lower section of the wreck, if they could reach it. Cal nodded. We go tomorrow before light. He went back to the kitchen and put water on for coffee. Through the window, the Nevada desert was silent and dark and empty all the way to the horizon. The stars were cold and clear. Somewhere out there, the Scavran were reporting back. More would come. He drank his coffee and looked at the scanning device on the table and thought about what came next. 2 days later, a government-issue sedan pulled up the dirt track to his ranch at mid-morning, and a woman got out of it. She was young, early 30s, and she was alone, which told him something. She was carrying a laptop bag and not a weapon, which told him more. She stood at the fence line and did not come through the gate, which told him she had enough sense to wait for permission. Cal came out to the porch and looked at her. You are a long way from wherever you work, he said. She looked at him steadily. There was an impact event 9 miles from this property 11 days ago. I traced the electromagnetic signature here. She paused. I came alone. I did not file a report. I just need to know if I'm right. Her name was Nina Draper. She worked signals analysis for a government monitoring program that Cal had heard of and did not particularly trust. He looked at her for a long time. She did not look away, and she did not look like she was lying. She looked like someone who had driven 400 miles on a private suspicion and was now standing at a fence, hoping she had not made a very large mistake. Cal opened the gate. Come inside, he said. I'll make coffee. He protected 3 lost alien princesses. Then their cosmic queen mother found him. Part 4. The Throne Reaches Out. Nina Draper stood in the barn doorway for a very long time, without saying anything. Lyra, Ren, and Sova looked at her. She looked back at them. Then she looked at Cal, who was leaning against the workbench with his coffee, and then back at the 3 alien princesses sitting in his barn on a pile of sleeping bags and borrowed blankets from his linen closet. Okay, Nina said finally, in a voice that was working hard to stay calm. Okay, Cal agreed. She sat down on the hay bale he pulled over for her and spent about 20 minutes asking questions that were careful and specific and showed she was trying to understand rather than just react. Cal answered what he could. Lyra answered the rest through the translation device, with patience that surprised him. She had a formal quality to her, a kind of careful dignity, but she spoke to Nina directly and without condescension. Sova watched Nina with open curiosity, which was the most interest Sova had shown in anything that was not food or the outdoors in several days. Ren did not say anything, but she watched Nina the way she watched everything, quietly, completely, as if she was cataloging details for later. When Nina had enough to work with, she opened her laptop and did not close it again for the next 4 days. She was, it turned out, extremely useful. The signal core from the crash site was intact, as Lyra had hoped, but it was badly damaged and would not transmit on its own. What it could do, Nina determined after examining it alongside Lyra for most of the first afternoon, was act as a frequency anchor, holding a specific Vorath signal band steady, while an external transmitter did the actual broadcasting. Cal had a transmitter. It was old, military surplus, and had been sitting in his workshop for years, under a tarp, for reasons he had never fully explained to himself. It was not powerful enough to reach orbit on its own. But Nina had brought equipment from her car. Compact amplifiers, signal boosters, things she had taken from the monitoring station on the quiet. And between her gear, Cal's transmitter, and the signal core from the ship, they had something that might, in Lyra's careful estimation, reach far enough. The question was how far enough actually was. Lyra could not answer that. She did not know where her mother's forces were searching, or if they were searching at all yet. In Vorath politics, a missing royal vessel could mean many things, and not all of them resulted in immediate rescue operations. There were protocols, there were factions, there were people who would prefer the search to move slowly. "We send the message," Cal said. "We see what comes back." They built the transmitter setup in the workshop over 3 days. Nina handled the amplification chain. Cal handled the physical mounting and power supply, running a line from the backup generator so the house current would not fluctuate and draw attention. Lyra spent hours sitting beside the signal core, encoding the message in a Vorath cipher that only the royal household's receivers would be able to read. On the 4th day, they sent it. Then they waited. The response came in less than 6 hours. Cal had expected to wait days. Nina had expected to wait longer. The speed of the reply, even accounting for the fact that it arrived in a partial, fragmented burst that took Lyra 2 hours to fully decode, said something significant about how close the Vorath search was already operating. Lyra read the message 3 times before she said anything. Then she looked up at Cal and Nina with an expression that was difficult to read. "They are coming," she said. "An advanced ship, 2 rotations of the local star." Nina exhaled. 2 days. Cal nodded. "Good." Nina looked at the expression on his face, which had not changed at all, and then at Lyra. She said, "The message reads like a reckoning, not a rescue." "What does that mean?" Lyra was quiet for a moment. "It means my mother is not only coming to collect us," she said. "It means she is coming to address everything that led to this." "The people who attacked your ship," Cal said. "And everything behind them," Lyra said. The Scavran came back that night. 12 this time. Cal counted the perimeter triggers as they went off in sequence, and felt the difference in weight immediately. Not 5, not a flanking move, but a full perimeter approach from 3 directions simultaneously. They had studied what happened the first time, and they had brought more bodies and a wider spread to make the misdirection harder. They had also brought someone new. He came in from the road, in daylight the following morning, which was unexpected enough that Cal nearly made a mistake. A vehicle pulled up to the fence at 10 in the morning, and a figure stepped out that looked entirely human, tall, well-dressed, unhurried. He stood at the gate and waited. Cal watched from the window for 3 minutes, then he went outside. The figure introduced himself as a diplomatic representative of a Vorath political body, whose name translated, roughly, as the Succession Council. He spoke English without an accent, which meant the translation equipment he was using was far better than Lyra's repaired device. He was calm and pleasantly spoken, and he had the manner of someone who considered every conversation a transaction already in progress. He told Cal that the 3 young females in his care were the subject of a complicated and serious political matter far beyond the understanding or concern of any individual human being. He said that the wisest and most beneficial action Cal could take, for himself, for his world, and for the girls themselves, would be to step aside and allow a peaceful resolution of the situation. He made it sound entirely reasonable. Then when Cal said nothing, the man made promises: safety for Cal and his property, a financial settlement of a scale that would be meaningful even to a planetary civilization, formal acknowledgement of his assistance. He listed these things in a smooth, practiced way, each one following the last like items on a menu. Then, when Cal still said nothing, the man shifted slightly. He mentioned with the same pleasant tone that Earth was a small and largely undefended world. He mentioned that the current situation could resolve cleanly or not cleanly, and that the difference between those 2 outcomes was largely a matter of Cal's next decision. Cal listened to all of it. He stood at the fence in the morning light, with his hands at his sides, and his face giving nothing away. The way he had learned to stand in rooms where important and dangerous people expected to see something on your face that they could work with. When the man finished, Cal said, "No." The man paused. "No to which part?" "All of it," Cal said. "You understand what you are refusing," the man said. It was not quite a question. "They are in my house," Cal said. "That is my authority." The man looked at him with something that was probably meant to look like patience, but had the actual quality of a calculation being run. Then he nodded once, and walked back to his vehicle and left. Cal went inside. In the interior room, Ren was standing at the small window that looked toward the road. She had been there the whole time. When Cal came in, she turned and looked at him, and something in her expression was different from any expression she had worn in all the days since the crash. Not the careful stillness she usually kept, but something raw and open and very young. She sensed something in Vorath that Cal's belt device only caught in pieces. He looked at Lyra. "She says she did not know a person could do that," Lyra said. "Stand like that, say no like that, to something that large." Cal did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He went to the kitchen and put water on. Nina came in from the workshop 3 minutes later. "They are going to hit us tonight." "I picked up comm traffic on the Scavern frequency about 20 minutes ago." "I know," Cal said. "What do we do?" "The same thing we did before, but we do it better." That night was harder. The 12 became 10 before dawn, and the 10 did not break as cleanly as the 5 had. Cal took a hit to his left arm from a directed energy discharge that came out of the dark from a direction he had not expected. It felt like someone had pressed a hot iron against his forearm and held it there for a second. The suit's aim had been off. A direct hit would have taken the arm. He tied it off with the shirt from his back, switched the rifle to his right shoulder, and kept moving. When the eastern sky started to go gray and the last of the Scavern had withdrawn, Cal sat against the outside wall of the barn and looked at the dressing on his arm. Nina came out and crouched beside him. She looked at the arm, and then at him. "That needs more than field dressing," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. She did not argue. She went inside and came back with the first aid kit and redressed it herself without being asked. He let her. One more day. The advance ship was coming. He just had to hold the ground. One more day.